I'm on 10 acres, and it's all wooded. I could stand in this house and scream and nobody would come. I went to work in 2003 at Lehman Brothers, completely a normal person. This is where I ended up, having to learn to be able to kill somebody with my bare hands.
Wall Street was destined for where it is now, with or without Lehman going out of business. They were on a roller coaster to nowhere. It was a bubble that had to burst, and it did burst, and Lehman helped it burst. I don't tell people I used to work for Lehman Brothers. I don't tell people I was labeled a Lehman Brothers whistleblower. Can't prove it, but I was blacklisted from Wall Street. So what I did was I sold my house, I bought a motorcycle, and I just travel all the time now. Justice to me is a whole host of things all happening. And I don't think they'll ever happen, which is why I'm on my bike around the world. And Lehman had a reputation on Wall Street as being cowboys. Their business practice is a bit aggressive. I quickly learned the culture is that you don't tell people what you're doing, you just make money. I joined Lehman in 1994. I was vice president. You were on your toes. You were watching your back. You had to do the best. There was just a certain vibrancy all the time. But I enjoyed that. It's difficult to describe an electric feeling, but I'd never felt so intense all day as I did at Lehman Brothers. It sounds crazy, but actually it was good. I guess it's like a drug. Another drug we were on.
At the top level of the corporation, from Lehman Brothers, people really believed in what they were doing. They thought they were going to hit the home run, hit the jackpot, money was going to come flowing in. Below that level, in middle management, there were a number of people who were greatly concerned and believed that Lehman was putting itself at enormous risk and that it could be a disaster. My responsibility is to simply find the facts, the truth, put them into a report, and then let others decide the consequences of that. So the question was, what was it they were doing and how did they end up in bankruptcy? So we had to assemble a team with experts, but the case was so sophisticated that those experts ended up hiring professors and other experts who then advised them so they could advise us. I had no sense in the beginning as just how significant the issue of Lehman's failure was and how incredibly massive it was. Lehman's bankruptcy involved almost $700 billion worth of assets. And the losses to the creditors even today are in the tens of billions of dollars. But it wasn't just the size of the bankruptcy. It's that Lehman's was involved in all aspects of the financial world across the entire globe. So when Lehman went into bankruptcy, they took a lot of things with them. And to some extent, they stopped a large part of the financial economy, at least for a short period of time. And we're still living with the consequences of that bankruptcy.
I started in late '97. I had another job as a lawyer at a Wall Street law firm and decided to leave there. And before I knew it, I was a Lehman Brothers lawyer. Did have a reputation as an exciting, up-and-coming place to work. They were known as the scrappy newer bank. It felt good. I didn't know anything at that point. I thought nothing but the best. I had the highest hopes. The aim of Lehman Brothers was to make money any way that we could. You know, any way that could be done without an undue risk of being caught or penalized, we would do. It was not about right or wrong. It was about can we or can't we? And if we could, we did. Lehman began to get into the mortgage game early on. They wanted to be on that entire chain, to own an interest in that entire chain. We did have one of the best real estate teams and one of the best bond departments on Wall Street, so why not? It was sort of natural that Lehman would take a leadership role in that area, and we did.
I started working in the mortgage industry in 1981 as a receptionist. It was very exciting, and I felt that it was just really important to know more about the housing industry because I know it's the biggest purchase in one's lifetime. And then in 1985, I became a loan processor. A loan processor is the person that meets personally with the borrower and gathers their information about purchasing a home. So once they have completed a loan application, I'm the one who gets the paperwork at that point. So it's my responsibility to make sure that they met all the requirements before submitting it to the underwriter.
My job was to solicit new brokers who solicit consumers. My job was to help people to fulfill the American dream. To have a home where a family can be happy, kids can lounge on the couch, being able to have outrageous birthday parties. That's the American dream for me. So what I liked about the mortgage industry was the freedom that it offered. I was able to work the hours that I needed to be with my children as well. That was very, very important to me, and the income was amazing. There's no other job that you can walk away with $30,000 in a month. What I remember from BNC is doing my background on them because I needed to make sure they were stable and that they were reputable And when I did the research, I Googled them, of course, like everybody else, and they were owned by Lehman Brothers, which at the time was one of the largest financial institutions in the world. And so I felt very confident about making the switch. And unfortunately, they didn't turn out to be so reputable.
When I got into the business, I was told that an underwriter's job was to assume that everybody is lying and that your job is to go into the file and either validate that they are lying or that they have totally told the truth. So an underwriter that never underwrites or approves a loan, no one is getting paid. And that's what puts the target on our back. That's what puts the pressure on us when there is a shop that are not doing all of their deals on top of the table.
Hey,
I'm coming up close to the causeway. Where are you?
keep straight, and I'll flag you down.
Are you in Sacramento?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, I'm coming through West Sac.
I'm looking for you now because I saw your car pass.
Come here. Hey, honey.
It's changed a lot, huh?
Huh?
It's changed a lot, didn't it?
Yeah, I haven't been back here since 2005. Down in over here looking at the building. Yeah, never.
The nice change about it is that it's no more
When is it?
memories of B and C left.
I remember my last day
Yes.
after I came back off of stress leave.
Yes.
You weren't there.
No, I was
You
on
was
stress leave.
When I arrived at BNC Mortgage, the atmosphere in the office was very upbeat.
Last year was a record one for the housing market.
Get on the fast track at Zoom Credit.
It's a strong market. People still need a place to live.
Do you own a house? Are you looking for lower mortgage payments? Let's call Cal and refinance our house.
When you're making the largest investment of your life, you're going to go with somebody that you trust, so they're going to look around for a name they know.
A home loan are just around the corner, just seconds away.
What a great place to invest your money.
Call Cal today and get a low-Cal mortgage. You owe it to yourself.
The overall expansion came following the tech bubble. The tech bubble burst in 01, 02, and that was followed by a real estate bubble. Interest rates were pushed way down, and real estate became the new game to play. And at the same time, there was this expansion and development of new forms of lending, subprime lending, and there was a realization that this was a market that could really be pushed up, and Lehman was a big part of that wave.
And put 1% Realty and Loans experts to work for you. For outstanding rates and financing, it's 1% Realty and Loans, 1-866-440-2775, or apply online at 1%RealtyOnline.com.
Where we make the mortgage process easy and understandable. Home of the zero down home loan.
It was just a very volatile time, and it was a crazy frenzy time because subprimes came into play, and they targeted people who had these lower credit scores that weren't able to go to the banks because their score wasn't high enough. So now they offer subprimes.
Tammy has a mortgage for those with low credit or high debt. It's called a subprime mortgage. Many of these loans entice borrowers with no money down and low monthly payments.
Back in 2001, so-called subprime loans made up just 5% of the mortgage market. 5 years later, it was up to 20%.
They targeted everybody who was ever gullible. And sales is sales, you know. If you got the gift of gab and you can talk real good and convince a person, they were taking the bite and going for it.
Somebody sold them a dream that was not true. That practice led people buying homes that they could not afford because they got it at a low interest rate And nobody explained to them, in 2 years, your payment is going to triple. And so if you go from a $1,200 payment to a $3,300 or $3,600 payment, you can't make it. There's no way you can do that.
The higher the interest rate that they were charging was more money for the broker to make. And then they would charge an origination fee like $2,000 or $3,000. And then on that back end, with an interest rate that the homeowner didn't know anything about, you know, they could make up to $9,000, $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 on a deal.
And once the loan officers and all of the parties involved administratively, the company, once those checks are cut and everybody gets paid, nothing happens to them. But you as a homeowner can't sustain your mortgage.
How do you make as much money as possible? By going where no one's gone before, and you have to dream up legal ways of making a lot of money that to a lot of people who have ethical, moral standards may seem quite illegal. But if there's no law, it's not illegal, so do it because you're going to make some money. Investment banks operate in that fashion.
We were pushing hard on legal questions and on accounting questions to do things that to most reasonable people would seem illegal. But we would find a way to tell ourselves it was legal. But as time went on, I kept having these sort of troubling moments of, wait a second, is that really what I think it is? Are we really doing what that looks like we're doing? And I started raising questions. One of my bosses just told me, look, these guys are here just to make money. Stop being a Boy Scout. Stop thinking they want to save the world or they want to treat everybody with respect. No, they're here to make money.
This is the time when I worked at BNC. I was so cute. Some good times. Until it got crazy. Management would give us this thing to hang from the wall to tell us what our office was to accomplish each month. And the goal would go up. So it started like $2 billion in volume, $3 billion. Slowly but surely, the loan officers are out in the field hustling, just bringing in loan. There goes Linda. She had come out of her officer's loans. There's loan files over here, and loan files over there, loan files up here, loan files on her desk, files she was working on, and who knows what else. We had files everywhere on the floor. And then this cabinet was just full of loan files. So much to do. The volume picked up. And in order for them to meet their quotas, they just started bringing in junk.
I always consider myself like an FBI agent because I think it is my job to make sure, number one, that the information that they have indicated in their documentation, I verify that that is accurate. I also verify that it is legitimate by looking at the documentation to make sure that they have not been doctored or information changed. And I look to see if it's a different type set of printing, anything that looks suspicious. BNC. This is the loan. I see that all that's whited out. I can tell it now like I could tell it then. Good for me. I kept some falsified information. They've whited out the information here and handwritten in what they want me to know. But they don't realize that the average balance does not even support it. If I gave this to Stevie Wonder, he could sue it. During that time, it happened to be that I underwrote 5 files from the same broker. I'm calculating, I'm retaining information, you know, and now I'm going to do the approval. So I did the approval, wrote up the conditions on the first one, and then pulled the second one. The second one, I started going through it. The W-2 looked identical with the exception of the name, the social, and the party's name, who it was to. So then I said, it looked familiar. So I picked up the file that I had already approved, and I opened it up. And it was the same W-2 with the changes. They didn't change the employer ID number, so it was a different company with the same ID number. So now I'm really, all my sensors are up now. Like, well, what else is a lie in this file? Then I picked up the third file. I wonder what's wrong with this one. Picked up the fourth file, picked up the fifth file, all from the same lender. Oh my goodness. All fraud. It's disgusting.
And I got a phone call from Linda Weeks that I needed to come into the office immediately. So I come in, I sit at her desk, and she shows me 2 files from my brokers, from my clients. And she says, I want you to look through these files, take your time, and tell me what you see. So I'm looking through it, and I go to the other file, and I flip through it. And the tax numbers are the same, but the companies are different. My goodness. And so I said, okay, that mortgage company is committing fraud. And so I got another file the following day from that same office, and I was looking through it, and there was a gentleman who they claim worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken, which he did, but that he was earning $7,000. So I got in my car with that information, went to that Kentucky Fried Chicken, spoke to the owner, and said, I would like to apply for the job that pays $7,000 a month in salary. Not hourly wages, but salary. And he looked at me from behind the counter and he said, I would like to have $7,000 a month from this business. It doesn't happen. And so I went back, went to that mortgage company as a courtesy to let them know that they needed to have quality control. What I did not know is that someone in our office had contacted them and said, all you need to do is change the broker. I thought, you know, I'm not going to allow this to happen because this man clearly knows they're committing fraud, and he thinks he can just put paint over the top and get reapproved and be doing the same thing. So at that time, I got an email sent to me that was not supposed to come to me. And what the email said is that we need to keep this company going because I have all these loans that need to fund. And so this was a corporate approval of them committing fraud. Wow. I realized that the entire corporation was corrupt. And they don't want me to know about it.
Lie after lie after lie.
If we get this right today, Papa will squeeze some of those shorts. Squeeze them hard. Not that I want to hurt him. Don't get that, please, because that's just not who I am.
Very few people ever saw Dick Fuld in the flesh. He was like Big Brother. Every quarter, he'd give us a speech, and we'd tune in on our computer screens. And here was Big Brother saying, "You've done a great job, but it's not good enough. Next quarter, we want more."
I am soft, I'm lovable. But what I really want to do is I want to reach in, rip out their heart, and eat it before they die.
Lehman Brothers was Dick Folt's life. And he was considered one of the most brilliant men on Wall Street. He was the longest-serving executive in any investment house on Wall Street. In that year, he was named one of the top executives in the United States, the very same year of the bankruptcy. And he led Lehman Brothers to record years, record earnings, record bonuses for its executives. He was described to me by Secretary Paulson as the eternal optimist. He said, if Dick Folt was fishing and he had a nibble on the line, he was already filleting the fish, believing he'd already caught it.
He had this reputation of being a ruthless guy, whatever that means. Does that mean willing to break the law wherever he may be? In my view, apparently. That's what it looked like to me. Or maybe it just meant he was very aggressive in trading and was very good in making money for his employer. That probably too. He was known as the gorilla. And this ripping of the heart out thing is just another dimension of that reputation.
He was famous for being reclusive up on the 31st floor in the end. He had his own elevator. In my first years, I saw him in the lift, the elevator, in the building. And he'd walk in and he'd stand in the corner and not interact with anyone, just kind of glare. I'm the chairman, don't look at me, don't talk to me.
Reach in, rip out their heart, and eat it before they die.
When I saw this video of Mr. Folt giving this speech about how if anybody gets in your way, anybody says anything, your job is to kill him, to get rid of him. The wave of reality that came over me was horrifying.
See, when you're a public company, the top 5 executives of the firm have to show all of the compensation that they are paid. And you have to disclose the numbers, the value. And we were basically hiding certain of those awards through a loophole, a technical interpretation of a law, of the rules, that we said, no, we can twist that this way and find a way where we can leave off hundreds of millions of dollars worth of pay. We don't have to tell the public about that. This was very troubling to me. And my bosses said this loophole covers us. The reason that they wanted to hide these additional stock awards was that they were already paying themselves quite generously. So let's say for the CEO, Dick Folt, you know, we would disclose that he would get paid $25 million, but really he got $30 million. We would disclose a year later $30 million, and he really got $35 million. And it was just because they wanted more than they thought the shareholders would approve. Finally, it got to me. The numbers kept getting bigger and bigger. It was a source of constant bother, and finally in 2006, I said, enough.
You created me to worship. You created me to fear. Help me say yes. You help me say yes. I take pride in my job. So when I started looking at the documentation and noticing some discrepancies, I would question it. Then my manager started taking these particular accounts away from me and passing them on to another account manager. My volume decreased slowly but surely. I started questioning myself. Am I not doing my job right? But I wasn't doing anything different. Good coffee. And then not knowing every day when you walk up in that office, what's going to happen today, because it was always something changing. The attitudes, accounts being away, management calling me on the phone. You could just feel the tension. So it just got to the point I dreaded going to work every day.
This is an email sent to the acting branch manager. I am insulted that I would be placed under a microscope for discovering fraud in files I underwrite and brought to the attention of corporate. I felt singled out, and attempts have been made to force me out of the company because I wasn't a team player.
I decided to call the senior vice president, and it went from bad to unimaginably worse. And within a week, they had hired a new manager.
When they walked into our office, they walked in our office like the mafia. They were like arm to arm, marching in like we're taking over the world.
The gentleman that they brought into the office, who had no particular job title, he was a grimy guy. And he would just walk around the office, which was a small office. Well, what is he doing? Well, what is his job? And then there was one particular time that he was sitting at my desk, and he had his chair, and he kind of had a leg here close to mine. And then that's when he's kind of breathing, giving me the heavy breathing I could hear. And then again, he was talking about African-American women and what he heard that they're good about, and was I like that, and just being very sexual, which was just totally out of place. And I was like, ugh. And then what he would like to do with me.
On the particular day I was leaving the office, I shook hands with him, and when I went to leave, he wouldn't let go of my hand. He pulled me towards him and whispered in my ear, he said, I know everything about you. I know where your daughters go to school. I know where they live. I own you.
Everyone was making the complaints about how we were being treated, the harassment that was going on, the talking down to, the sexual harassment, the just a very unprofessional atmosphere, and the stresses that the management team was putting on us ladies. And nobody was listening to us. Nobody. Help me to say yes. Just help me to say yes.
I pop in, I open the file drawer, and next thing I know, I felt a hand on my shoulder, at the same time, breath on my neck. And before I could even gasp at it, he pushed himself up against my backside. And I lost it.
One morning, I went into the office and I said, hi, so-and-so, do you have my files? Nope, haven't seen them, don't know anything about them. Went to the next person. There were 5 processors. Nope, haven't seen them, don't know anything about them. I'm like, okay, am I losing my mind? How's it possible that $30+ million in loans are disappeared? And then the manager of the office came up to me. I'm standing by the front door because I'm asking the receptionist, have you seen these loans? Because she's the one that logs them in. Nope, I haven't seen them. And the manager suggests that I came in and took them. 58 files. It's a huge amount of files. And I started laughing. I was giggling. I said, you think that I came in here and got them? And he said, well, they're not here, and you're responsible. What a joke. No more. No more. No more. And what they wanted to do to me was to destroy my credibility. So if I went to a new job, a new employer, and told them what happened, there would be no basis because my credibility is tarnished. Because I lost files, which is impossible to do. People that are like them, who hire people to come in and do dirty work, that those people want to see you down. They want to see me be afraid. I came home and plants were moved around on my porch, screens were torn. So people were letting me know that, hey, we've been at your house. My attorney, my trainer, all told me, change your ID and move away. Move to another state. And I looked around and I said, you know what? I'm not running from anybody. I am not going to run. And my children at one point came to me, we just want our mom back. We don't like this new you. We want life the way it was. They could have fired me at any moment in time, but they chose not to. They chose to torture me. They chose to ruin my credibility. They chose to make me look like a loon, which they successfully did.
It was a long time ago that I was contacted on this case, and I got a call from someone that said that there were some women at a mortgage office that had been harassed. What's interesting is that these women did not know exactly what was happening to each of them. They had not sat together and planned this. Although they worked in the same office, they each had their own individual experiences. And so all of a sudden, when they realized that the same harassment, the same problems, the same complaints about the mortgages were happening, they came together and said, this is wrong. So they have a claim for wrongful termination. It's based upon the fact that they were whistleblowers, that they were protected by law because they were complaining about illegal behavior in the workplace. As a part of this, they were also sexually harassed and threatened. If you talk to these women, you know how serious this has been for them and what it's cost them. Our claims are currently worth $27 million. I think they're worth every dime of that because these women's lives have been ruined by this. And how much money is it worth to have your life ruined? To stand up for what you believe in and what's right.
The first time that BNC came on my radar was when I read the papers about the alleged mortgage fraud in California. So as soon as you heard that, I went to my boss saying, "Do you hear about this?" And the answer is yes, and nothing said. So you knew that the papers were right and don't ask questions. So I wanted to go and check them out, but I was told, no, you can't do that, somebody else is going. So I knew things must be really bad because they don't even want me to go. I was in charge of the balance sheet, which is everything you own and everything you owe and the difference. Lehman had well over 1,000 companies worldwide, so what you have to do is add up all those 1,000 companies, come up with the balance sheet number. Yeah, that's what we showed the public. The total assets of Lehman Brothers were about $1.5 trillion. But then they had derivatives which work in what's called notional value, and they had even more trillions. Through 2005 into 2006, at Lehman, everything was fantastic. Everything was green, green, green. And then small things happened, not so much in Lehman Brothers, but you knew that the real estate market and mortgages were too good to be true.
Okay. Do you run into a lot of traffic down there?
No, I mean, not that much, but traffic, but not that much traffic, though.
You could just feel the tension in the office. You're going to have your good days and your bad days. But those bad days became more and more and more, and it was depressing. It just got to the point where I just said I needed a break. So I took off for 2 weeks. During that time that I took off, I was inquiring about other employment with some girlfriends that worked at some other companies, and I went and interviewed and was offered the position. And I was like, great, yeah.
He is good. Yes. The Lord is good. I need y'all to get amped up on this song because I don't.
That is what the environment at BNC was. I just wanted to get out of there. After I left BNC, my regional manager looked at me and she said, for some reason, she says, I don't think this is it. This is over. She said, just dot your I's and cross your T's. You know? I remember one day sitting on my couch, calling the new supervisor at the other job, trying to find out when I was going to start. And then they said, this time we've changed our mind, we're not going to hire you. I was in a panic. I was like, oh my gosh. The bottom fell out.
14.8 million American adults suffer with depression.
Right.
What is depression? Because some folks may not know. You may be in it, but you don't know. Right. Depression is a common and serious medical.
And then I started having to work some temporary jobs, going through an employment agency, and the rate of pay was a lot less than I was, accustomed to making, and not knowing if the assignment was going to be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. So it was just a very rocky and tight situation at that time. And then I eventually lost my place. I got evicted because I couldn't pay the rent anymore. I lost my car. I was 4 months to pay my car off. My very first car that I bought by myself. The car got repossessed. And I couldn't send Sean off to school. And to this day, he'll say it didn't bother him. But I know it did, because he kind of blamed me for not being able to pursue his career, and that's what that industry did to me, and the fraud in BNC.
Let the church say amen. Amen.
I left BNC, and I did go to work for Countrywide. The same issues were present at Countrywide that I had just gotten out of with BNC. And then I got a job with another company, and within 6 months, they closed their doors. So that 3 years, you had companies here today, gone tomorrow. During that time, I was turned down left and right. I could not get any job in the mortgage industry.
That a lot of homeowners in this country are under tremendous stress right now.
It doesn't matter how hard you work, you're still going to lose your home.
The signs dotting Stockton neighborhoods are as familiar as flags flying on the 4th. So many homes in this California community have been vacated.
Foreclosures across the country are up a staggering 87% over this very same time last year.
They call the dead lawns foreclosure brand.
Those falling home prices are like an infection, now spreading throughout the U.S. economy.
It's a war out there. I mean, these people are losing homes every single day.
There is one faucet for the entire camp of potable water, which is right here.
And by 2007, you knew things were going downhill. And then our financial year was November the 30th, 2007. And we had a record year, the best year ever at Lehman Brothers. And I couldn't believe it. I thought things should be much worse.
Lehman, in the spring of 2008, issued its very first losses that they'd ever incurred. And they needed to have something positive to say to the market. The only way that Lehman could get rid of assets would be to sell them. The problem was that the assets they had, no one wanted to buy. So what they did was they came up with a gimmick. It was called Repo 105.
A repo is a sale with an agreement to buy back later. Repo 105. Repo 105 was a method of hiding how much you borrowed.
And what it involved essentially was transferring $50 billion worth of assets off of the balance sheet at the beginning or end of each quarter, just before the reporting would be made public. Assets were transferred from the United States subsidiary to the British subsidiary, engaged in repo transactions there, where the repos could then be considered as sales rather than simply loans as they were in the United States. And at the end of a few days after the quarter, The monies were simply returned back to the United States and put back on a balance sheet.
The whole purpose of this is to be able to bring your balance sheet down so that shareholders think you haven't borrowed as much as you actually have, and you're allowed to say that you've been reducing bad assets where you haven't.
And every time they did it, commentators, TV personalities would say, well, Lehman's getting better. Look, they've gotten rid of all of these assets. And the answer is they never have.
It was illegal to tell the public, we have these assets, we have these borrowings, when I knew the numbers were different. Yeah, to me that was illegal. I'm not a lawyer, but that was wrong. That was not a gray area, it was red, with bells ringing. When Lehman started raising money in 2008, using all these numbers and Repo 105, that's when I thought, oh, this is the end. You can't raise billions. And it was, by the time they went bankrupt, they'd raised almost 12 billion. The population of the planet's 7 billion. So a lot of money. And whoever invested, they lost everything in 8 months. The fact that they were raising money through lying, that was it.
I had quit in 2006. I mentioned that they were hiding all kinds of compensation, okay? Certain stock awards were being hidden and not being disclosed to the public because we had found this loophole. But then the rules changed. The rules now made it very plain. All of it must be out there in front. And so this meant that for the CEO, he was going to have to show $100 million or more of new compensation that just came out of nowhere. This was going to be very embarrassing, and I couldn't wait to see it. When finally the booklet, it's called the proxy statement containing this compensation information, came out in March of 2008, so I had already been away for 2 years. I got the book and I opened it up, and I'm like, where is it? Where did it go? They didn't put it in there. They didn't follow the new rules. It was stunning. It was amazing to me. By then, Mr. Full, the CEO, and the other guys had been collecting these secret payments for many years. And so on this new table that said, tell us everything, all the restricted stock you're holding, he was holding $409 million, and they disclosed $146 million. They hid $260 million worth of stock awards. That's how big it had gotten. Over $250 million worth of stock that should have been shown under these new rules was hidden. Gone. Now it was black and white, and I knew that they were breaking the law. And so I brought that to the SEC in April of 2008. The Securities and Exchange Commission is the regulator for the public stock and bond markets in America. It's like the police of Wall Street. You submit the material through an email, like a whistleblower submission. So I gave them all this information that said, hey, the Lehman executives have been lying about their compensation for years. Here is the hidden stuff. Here is the value today. It was easy enough for a reporter, any member of the public, anybody could have followed it. And I sent it in, and I got an automatic email back saying, thank you, we have it, we're looking at it, and they completely ignored me. Just silence. I'm still waiting.
I didn't really have much faith in the SEC, and I thought, what can I do? What can I do? And then I remembered this code of ethics, which I'd read when it first came out. And I remember how I thought it was funny because what they were saying in the code of ethics was like completely the opposite of the way they ran their business. And it said, it is your duty. The code of ethics was telling me I've got to write it. a letter because you know something and it is your duty. So I sat down on Sunday afternoon with my computer and I wrote out the letter. During my tenure with the firm, I have been a loyal and dedicated employee and always have acted in the firm's best interests. I have become aware of certain conduct and practices, however, that I feel compelled to bring to your attention. The firm has tens of billions of dollars of unsubstantiated balances, which may or may not be bad or non-performing assets or real liabilities. In any event, the firm's senior management may not be in a position to know whether all of these accounts are in fact described in a, quotes, full, fair, accurate, and timely, end quotes, manner, as required by the code. But I felt compelled, both morally and legally, to bring these issues to your attention. Very truly yours, Matthew Lee. I wanted to hand deliver it because if I just put it in internal mail, I'd never know that it had arrived. Part of the reason I sent it to 4 people was one of them surely is going to read it. And actually, out of the 4, only one of them was in their office, and he was on the phone. And I just walked into the room, thrust it in his face. He took it and kept on going, and I went by. I felt relief, and I walked into the office of somebody I could kind of confided in, and I just said, I've done the craziest thing I ever did in my life.
We had this individual who wrote a letter complaining that, in fact, Lehman Brothers was making their books look better than what they were. So I sent 2 young lawyers out to interview this person. They came back, they said, we think he's telling the truth. And I said, I can't believe Lehman would do something like he's describing in the letter. And then finally they came in with a series of emails which involved some of the senior people describing this process as, you know, a gimmick, a drug we are on, you know, all those sort of things. And I realized that, in fact, what he had been saying was true.
You know, there's always strange things going on in all industries. And can I live with it? Can I live with it? And you can usually live with most things because in the long run, it'll be okay. But in 2008, it wasn't that way. I remember the moment I was fired. I was sitting in my office. I had a round table in my office, and there were about 5 people, and we were on the phone to Brazil. And my phone went, and I saw it was my boss. So I swiveled my chair, and I picked up. I said, look, I'm in a meeting. We're discussing this. And he said, come right away. So I had to get up, and I went down to his office, and he just said, you're fired. Lehman, it was already in the abyss. It just hadn't hit the bottom yet.
We found that Lehman, their approach was, we believe that we are right in what we're doing, and even though we have set these risk limits, they continue to exceed those risk limits, believing that they were going to ultimately be successful. So it's like you're running in a direction and you're not going to stop, even though you're going through stop signs, one after another. And they just kept going.
Good evening, everybody. The worst financial crisis in decades today sent political and economic shockwaves throughout the country.
Lehman Brothers, one of the oldest institutions of its kind, filed the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history.
New York investment banker, once called the masters of the universe, were sent packing, humiliated.
Just tell us how you're feeling. It's awful, I know, but...
It sucks. I never for a minute thought that Lehman would go bankrupt. And when it did, I was as amazed as anybody else was.
This is a 158-year-old company. Its rise and its performance has mirrored the performance of the United States of America becoming the superpower in the world. If Lehman can go down, people are saying, what does that mean about the health of the American financial system right now?
And as financial market convulsions raced around the world like a tsunami.
Take a look at this. Nothing like this has ever happened before. The United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Sweden, Switzerland, European Central Bank, even China.
I'd never imagined that the bad behavior that I saw at Lehman and similar behavior at these other banks would take the world down the way that it did.
You're watching video right here of the Greek riot police pushing back protesters in Athens tonight.
Lehman Brothers' former CEO, Richard Fuld, is living pretty. A multi-million-dollar estate in Florida, a $21 million apartment on Park Avenue, another lavish estate in Greenwich, Connecticut.
It made me feel like is that they're just running. They've taken all the money they want. They've drained everything they wanted to drain out of that company, a handful of people, and left all the other people there to figure out what they were going to do with the rest of their lives.
If you haven't discovered your role, you're the villain today.
Your company is now bankrupt. Our economy is in a state of crisis, but you get to keep $480 million. I have a very basic question for you. Is this fair?
Okay. The actual documents we reviewed probably was in the range of 30 million documents. And we did over 250 interviews in conducting the investigation. When we started interviewing the witnesses, what surprised me the most was everyone wanted to talk. And you know what they wanted to say? They wanted to say, it wasn't me. I spoke with Dick Fuld for maybe up to 15, 18 hours, and he answered every question I put to him. I asked him whether or not he was aware of the views of some individuals within the corporation that their risks were too concentrated and that they had exceeded risk limits, and he made clear he was. I asked him why he didn't rely on that in making his judgment. And he said, do you think I'm foolish? I mean, no living, breathing human being lost more money than Dick Fuld lost as a result of the bankruptcy. He lost over $1 billion. And he pointed out to me quite accurately, none of those individuals had made billions trading stocks. None of them had headed major corporations in the financial area and brought them to the success that he had brought to Lehman Brothers. And he was in a position of having to rely on his judgment.
Did you mislead your investors? And I remind you, sir, you're under oath.
No, sir. We did not mislead our investors. And to the best of my ability at the time, given the information that I had, we made disclosures that we fully believed were accurate.
If everything had been properly exposed, Wall Street as we know it would be gone. And most everybody who's down here, who was here during the crisis, would be in jail right now. The crimes were committed up and down the street, and everyone knows that.
Both the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Reserve Bank had put personnel on premises with Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers provided every single document the regulators asked for. So the SEC, as well as the rest of the federal government, knew that risk exceedances were taking place as they were occurring. They saw the documents and the materials which reflected that, and yet nothing was done. The Securities and Exchange Commission did not understand what they were looking at. They did not understand the documents and the impact of these documents. And then the very day that one of the SEC lawyers finally looked at what they had, and he wrote an email which was spectacular, because what it says is, in essence, oh my God, look at this. This could be a problem. And indeed it was. 24 hours later, they were in bankruptcy.
The SEC does not work properly, and it hasn't in a long time. The major problem is the top people are brought in with every new president. They are not people who have worked their whole lives in this area. The top people at the SEC or at the Department of Justice, well, they were making millions of dollars defending Wall Street banks or working inside of Wall Street banks before they became the so-called police, okay? Why on earth would we expect them to go against their friends? And they almost always then go back and work for Wall Street when they're done.
Well, now, instead of prosperity trickling down, the pain has trickled up. From the struggles of hardworking Americans on Main Street to the largest firms on Wall Street. This country cannot afford 4 more years of this failed philosophy.
In the beginning of 2009, Obama was elected, and so he brought in his new people at the SEC. You have a director, the boss, the top boss, the CEO of the SEC, if you will, and then there is something called the Director of Enforcement, and so he's in charge of doing the investigations. And the guy that they put in was a lawyer from Deutsche Bank, and Deutsche Bank is one of the biggest banks involved in the crisis, okay? And furthermore, Deutsche Bank is one of the banks that was most involved with Lehman Brothers. And then we expect him, as the Director of Enforcement at the SEC, to now go and investigate Repo 105. This is never gonna happen. Never gonna happen.
The terrible thing happened, which is that Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy. And as soon as they declared bankruptcy, our case got shut down. You can't do anything more in the state court until the bankruptcy is resolved.
Lehman Brothers Holdings bankruptcy estate will pay $2.38 billion to compensate for its role in the previous decade's mortgage crisis, a federal judge decided, far less than the $11.4 billion some hedge funds had sought.
People usually, when they get in bankruptcy, get very small settlements. We call it pennies on the dollar. So we had very low expectations. But as time went on and we came out of the recession, they were beginning to have some money. And so we were contacted by the lawyers for Lehman Brothers, and they said they wanted to settle our case. So we had high expectations, finally, that we were going to get justice and get a fair settlement for them. Didn't turn out that way. We have been fighting this case in bankruptcy for all these years, since 2008. Yeah. And Lehman keeps saying, well, there's another claim out there that's going to eat up all your cases. They're talking about paying $2 billion to all these big banks who claim that they lost money on this mortgage fraud. What they want to do is they want to take the money that they owe you and put it back into equity funds, they call it, so that the leaders of Lehman Brothers are still there, are going to profit off this at your expense. It's an outrage. I'm not going to let it happen. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to do it.
They don't want to pay us because it's going to make news,
And
do you think?
Just because we are surviving it does not mean it was okay.
Sure.
And if they are so willing to bail out the banks and protect all of the crooks that stole from so many people, they still haven't recovered. And I say it often that many homeowners were displaced. Their children were yanked out of the schools that they had grown accustomed to. They were in their car or in shelters while the biggies kept their money, got bailed out, got parachutes, millions of dollars. And so I really think my drive, my concern is to find a way to rectify what happened to the American dream.
The world still waits for justice. And we could fill this courtroom and several more with the management committees of the big banks, the boards of directors, And I would add in the accounting firms, the rating firms, the law firms. Everybody is culpable in the crisis, and really no one has been held accountable.
What Lehman did here was they looked for an edge. And there are people out there who are still doing that. And the question is, have we regulated them so that they're, in their headlong search for that big profit, that they don't take the rest of the economy down with them? And that's a question that I don't know that we've necessarily answered. So I don't know that we've changed enough.
These guys, Lehman Brothers, they didn't get my soul, but they changed who I was. So there is no money that's going to compensate me, ever. What would compensate me, what would make me feel good, is if the people from the top were punished. And that's never going to happen. If I had Mr. Fuld in front of me, I would tell him that destroying lives is not a good way to make money. Once you fail on your mortgage, you can't rent a home. You go to get a job, oh, you're not creditworthy, you're not going to get that position. That's what he destroyed. He destroyed my life. He destroyed their lives. He destroyed their children's lives because now they're from a broken home. And they know what it feels like to be homeless when he's got 3 or 4 homes and yachts and helicopters. No, that's not okay. But it is okay because guess what? He got away with it.
I have no regret about writing that letter. Would I do the same thing? I wish I could have done more. But I did what I did. It's very peaceful. By oneself, one's peaceful. Normally there's activity. Whistleblowers get crushed, swept under the rug. Forget about them. Let's move on. I'll never go back to New York. I'm going to keep going on my motorcycle for as long as I can.
Did not mislead our investors, and to the best of my ability at the time, given the information that I had, we made disclosures that we fully believe were accurate.
This is truly a great day for America and a great day for American workers and small businesses all throughout the nation. The legislation I'm signing today rolls back the crippling Dodd-Frank regulations that are crushing community banks and credit unions nationwide. They were in such trouble. One size fits all. Those rules just don't work. And community banks and credit unions should be regulated the same way, and you have to really look at, they should be regulated the same way with proviso for safety as in the past when they were vibrant and strong. They shouldn't be regulated the same way as the large, complex financial institutions. By liberating small banks from excessive bureaucracy, and that's what it was, bureaucracy, we are unleashing the economic potential of our people.